In this unit, we will spend some time talking about individualized education plan and placement issues. To begin with, we will be focusing on individualized education plans or the IEPs. The writing of each student's IEP takes place within a larger picture of the special education process under IDEA. Before taking a detailed look at the IEP, it may be helpful to look briefly at how a student is identified as having a disability and needing special education and related services, and thus an IEP. There are several steps that are involved in writing an IEP or in the IEP process. The first step is that the child is identified as possibly needing special education and related services. One keyword that comes forward here is child find, which basically means that the state must identify, locate, and evaluate all children with disabilities in the state who need special education and related services. To do so, states conduct child find activities. A child may be identified by child find, and parents may be asked if the child find system can evaluate their child. Parents can also call the child find system and ask that their child be evaluated. Other than child find, the process could be through a referral or request for evaluation. A school professional may ask that a child be evaluated to see if he or she has a disability. Parents may also contact the child's teacher or other school professional to ask that their child be evaluated. This request may be verbal or in writing. Parental consent is needed before the child may be evaluated. Evaluation needs to be completed within a reasonable time after the parent gives consent. The next step is when the child is evaluated. The evaluation must assess the child in all areas related to the child's suspected disability. The evaluation results will be used to decide the child's eligibility for special education and related services and to make the decisions about an appropriate educational program for the child. If the parents disagree with the evaluation, they have the right to take the child for an independent educational evaluation or the IEE. They can ask the school system to pay for this IEE. Once the evaluation is done, the next step is when eligibility is decided. A group of professionals and parents look at the child's evaluation results. Together, they decide if the child is a child with a disability as defined by IDEA. Parents may ask for a hearing to challenge the eligibility decisions. The next step is when the child is found eligible for services. If the child is found to be a child with a disability as defined by IDEA, he or she is eligible for special education and related services. Within 30 calendar days after a child is determined eligible, the IEP team must meet to write an IEP for the child. Once the student has been found eligible for services, the IEP must be written. The next step is when the IEP meeting is scheduled. The school system schedules and conducts the IEP meeting. School staff must contact the participants, including the parents. They must notify parents early enough to make sure they have an opportunity to attend. They must next schedule the meeting at a time and place agreeable to parents and the school. Tell the parents the purpose and location of the meeting. Inform the parents as to who will be attending the meeting, and inform the parents that they may invite people to the meeting who have knowledge or special expertise about the child. The next step is when the IEP meeting is held and the IEP's timeline is determined in terms of how long it would take for the team to write the IEP. The IEP team gathers to talk about the child's needs and write the student's IEP. Parents and the student, when appropriate, are part of the team. If the child's placement is decided by a different group, the parents must be part of that group as well. Before the school system may provide special education and related services to the child for the first time, the parents must give consent. The child begins to receive services as soon as possible after the meeting. If the parents do not agree with the IEP and placement, they may discuss their concerns with other members of the IEP team and try to work out an agreement. If they still disagree, parents can ask for mediation or the school may offer mediation. Parents may file a complaint with the state education agency and may request a due process hearing, at which time mediation must be available. Following are the few steps about what happens after the IEP is written. Services are provided. The school makes sure that the child's IEP is being carried out as it was written. Parents are given a copy of the IEP. Each of the child's teachers and service providers has access to the IEP and knows his or her specific responsibilities for carrying out the IEP. This includes the accommodations, modifications, and supports that must be provided to the child in keeping with the IEP. The next step is very important, and that is that progress must be measured and reported to parents. A child's progress towards the annual goals is measured as stated in the IEP. His or her parents are regularly informed of their child's progress and whether that progress is enough for the child to achieve the goals by the end of the year. These progress reports must be given to parents at least as often as parents are informed of their non disabled children's progress. The IEP is reviewed frequently. The child's IEP is reviewed by the IEP team at least once a year or more often if the parents or school ask for a review. If necessary, the IEP is revised. Parents, as team members, must be invited to attend these meetings. Parents can make suggestions for the changes, can agree or disagree with the IEP goals, and agree or disagree with the placement. If parents do not agree with the IEP and placement, they may discuss their concerns with other members of the IEP team and try to work out an agreement. There are several options, including additional testing, an independent evaluation, or asking for mediation if available, or a due process hearing. They may also file a complaint with the state education agency. The last step is when the is about the child being re-evaluated. At least every 3 years, a child must be re-evaluated. This evaluation is often called a triennial. Its purpose is to find out if the child continues to be a child with a disability, as defined by IDEA, and what the child's educational needs are. However, the child must be re-evaluated more often if conditions warrant or if the child's parents or teacher ask for a re-evaluation. Now let's take a closer look at the IEP. Clearly, the IEP is a very important document for children with disabilities and for those who are involved in educating them. If done correctly, the IEP should improve teaching, learning, and results. Each child's IEP describes, among other things, the educational program that has been designed to meet the child's unique needs. By law, the IEP must include certain information about the child and the educational program designed to meet his or her unique needs. In a nutshell, the information that must be included are the current performance, that is, the present level of educational performance of the child, and it also must include the functional performance of a child. It must include annual goals. These are goals that the child can reasonably accomplish in an year. It should include special education services. The IEP must list the special education and related services to be provided to the child. In addition, the IEP must explain the extent, if any, to which the child will not participate with non disabled children in the regular class and other school activities. It should also include details about participation in state and district wide tests. Most states and districts give achievement tests to children in certain grades or age groups. The IEP must state if any testing accommodation is required. The IEP must state when the services will begin and how often they will be provided. The IEP for children at the age of 14 or if younger, if appropriate younger, must include transition service needs. For students who are 16 and if appropriate if when younger, the IEP must state what transition services are needed to help the child prepare for leaving school. Beginning at least 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority, the IEP must include a statement that the student has been told of any rights that will transfer to him or her at the age of majority. The statement would be needed only in states that transfer rights at the age of majority. The IEP must also state how the child's progress will be measured and how parents will be informed of that progress. One important thing to note is that while the law tells us what information must be included in the IEP, it does not specify what the IEP should look like. No one form or approach or appearance is required or even suggested. Each state may decide what its IEP will look like. Therefore, when you are working in different states, many different IEP forms will be used. What is important is that each form must be clear and as useful as possible so that parents, educators, related service providers, administrators, and others can easily use the form to write and implement effective IEPs for their students with disabilities. By law, certain individuals must be involved in writing a child's IEP, and these are listed in this slide. Some of them include parents, special education teachers, education teacher if required. That is, if the general education teacher will be delivering instruction to the student, a representative of the school system, an individual who can interpret the evaluation results. There should be representatives of any other agencies that will be responsible for providing services to the child, the student, when as and when appropriate, and any other individuals who would have knowledge or special expertise about the child, and if required, an interpreter must be present during the IEP meeting. Transition refers to activities meant to prepare students with disabilities for adult life. This can include developing post secondary education and career goals, getting work experience while still in school, setting up linkages with adult service providers such as vocational rehab agencies whenever appropriate for the student, given his or her interests, preferences, skills, and needs. The IP must include transition planning statements for students beginning at the age of 14 and sometimes younger, and it must include transition services for students beginning at the age of 16 and sometimes younger. A child may require any of the following related services in order to benefit from special education. Related services as listed under IDEA are included in this slide. If a child needs a particular related service in order to benefit from special education, the related service professional should be involved in developing the IEP. He or she may be invited by the school or parent to join the IEP team as a person with knowledge or special expertise about the child. To help decide what special education and related services the student needs, generally the IEP team will begin by looking at the child's evaluation results, such as classroom tests, individual tests given to establish the student's eligibility, and observations by teachers, parents, paraprofessionals, related service providers, administrators, and others. The information will help the team describe the student's present level of educational performance. In other words, how the student is currently doing in school. Knowing how the student is currently performing in school will help the team develop annual goals to address those areas where the student has an identified educational need. The IEP team must also discuss specific information about the child, which include the child's strengths, the parents' ideas for enhancing the child's education, the results of recent evaluations or re-evaluations, and how the student has or the child has done in district-wide tests. Other factors that may be discussed include things that would help the child advance towards annual goals, be involved in progress in the general curriculum, participate in extracurricular and non academic activities, and how much time the child would spend with typical peers. Depending on the needs of the child, the IEP team needs to consider what the law calls special factors, and these are included in this slide. The child's placement where the IEP will be carried out must be decided during the meeting. The placement decision is made by a group of people, including the parents and others who know the child, what evaluation results mean, and what types of placements are appropriate. In some states, the IEP team serves as the group for making the placement decision. In other states, the decision may be made by another group of people. In all cases, the parents have the right to be member of the group and that decides the educational placement for their child. While deciding on the placement, the team must remember that the child has to be educated in the least restrictive environment. The law also clearly states that special cases, separate schools, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment may only occur if the nature of the child's disability or the severity of the child's disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. After an IEP has been written, parents must receive a copy at no cost to themselves. The IDEA also stresses that everyone who will be involved in implementing the IEP must have access to the document. This could include the regular ed teacher, the special ed teacher, the related service providers, and any other service providers. Each of these individuals need to know what his or her specific responsibilities are for carrying out the child's IEP. This includes the specific accommodations, modifications, and supports that the child must receive according to the IEP. Prior to implementing the IEP, the school must provide a copy to the parents and they must attain permission from the parents to implement the IEP. Implementing the IEP, once the IEP is written, it is time to carry it out. And in order to carry it out, the individuals who are providing services to the student should know and understand their responsibility. The teamwork plays a very important part in carrying out an IEP, and therefore sharing expertise and insights can make everyone's job a lot easier. Another key component is the communication between home and school, as it allows both the parents and teachers to understand what the student is really struggling with, and thereby it allows them to provide better services. Other things that are important in implementing of an IEP is that someone must be responsible or someone should take charge of coordinating and monitoring the services. This could be anyone from the team, but usually in most states it is a special educator who is responsible of ensuring that the IEP is being implemented. Another key component for IEP implementation are regular progress reports. It is very, very important, and the law requires that the parents and the school will monitor the child's progress toward their annual goals. And if for some reason progress is not being meeting, the team can reconvene and change the goals to ensure that the student is successful. IEP must be reviewed at least once a year to ensure that the child is achieving their annual goals. However, if the child is not making progress, the team could decide to meet, reconvene, and work on making the necessary changes. And this is usually when the child's progress or lack of expected progress is made towards the annual goals in the general curriculum. If the child has been re-evaluated, then that information becomes important. Information about the child that the parents share could lead to reconvening and the IP being modified, and information about the child that the school shares could also be a reason for reconvening and reevaluating the child or modifying the goals in the IEP. There are times when parents may not agree with the school's recommendation about their child's education. Under the law, parents have the right to challenge decisions about their child's eligibility, evaluation, placement, and services that the school provides to the child. If parents disagree with the school's actions or refusal to take action in these matters, they have the right to pursue a number of options, which include trying to reach an agreement. They could ask for a mediation. They could ask for due process. And finally, they could file a complaint with the state education agency. In addition, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, requires that every 2 years states report progress towards meeting established performance goals that, at a minimum, address the performance of child's assessments, dropout rates, and graduation rates. As part of their review, OSEP determines how the IEP team made the decisions reflected in the IEP. Those decisions and the IEP content are based on the child's unique needs as determined through evaluation. Whether any state or local policies or practices have interfered with decisions of the IEP team about the child's educational needs and the services that the school would provide to meet those needs, and whether the school has provided the services listed in the IEP.